Welcome back, everybody. Today we're going to be doing a deep dive into the work of Olavo de Carvalho,
Oh, wow.
specifically his concept of the revolutionary mindset.
Yeah.
And I'm joined by our expert to help us unpack all of this. So,
It's going to be interesting.
yeah, a
Definitely.
lot to unpack there.
Yeah, so we've got excerpts from some of his books and articles.
Okay.
So when we talk about this revolutionary mindset, what exactly are we talking about?
Well, it's not so much about like a specific historical event,
Right.
like the French Revolution or, the rise of communism.
Right.
It's more this, it's more like a recurring way of thinking that he sees.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, like a mental blueprint that kind of...
It transcends time and place.
Exactly.
So it's not so much about like actual political movements.
Yeah.
It's more about just the way that people think about the world.
A way of thinking, yeah.
Gotcha.
And he identifies a few core characteristics
Okay.
that really define this mindset.
One of the big ones is like this utopian vision of the future.
Okay.
Like they have this picture in their mind of what a perfect society should look like, and they believe that anything is justified to reach that.
So it's like the ends justify the means.
Exactly.
Right.
And so this leads to this unshakable self-righteousness.
Okay.
Like they really believe...
You're on the right side of history.
Exactly.
Interesting.
They think that, the rules don't apply to them because their cause is so just.
So moral superiority.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting. Why does he think they have this moral superiority complex?
Because they believe so strongly
Okay.
that their cause is just.
Okay.
And that anything is justified to reach that.
So they're not really open to different viewpoints?
No, not really, no.
Or challenges to their ideology?
No, they basically create their own reality.
Yeah.
And they just filter out any information that doesn't fit into that worldview. They'll twist facts, they'll ignore things, they'll even demonize anyone who questions them.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So they're living in an echo chamber.
Exactly.
Gotcha. So that brings us to another aspect
Yeah.
of this revolutionary mindset.
Yeah.
And that is this hatred.
Hatred for traditional values and institutions.
Interesting.
Like family, religion,
And capitalism.
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. Why lump capitalism in with family and religion?
He believes that those are the foundation of Western civilization.
Oh, okay.
The structures that revolutionaries are trying to destroy.
Interesting. So he's challenging the common perception
Exactly.
that revolutionaries are for the poor and capitalists are all evil.
Yeah, that's like the common socialist narrative.
It's interesting, isn't it?
It is.
Because a lot of these revolutionary movements are funded by
capitalists, yeah.
by capitalists.
It's a very strange...
It's a weird dynamic.
Yeah, very strange.
So he believes that this capitalist versus revolutionary dichotomy is a myth.
It's a total myth. Yeah,
Sure.
it's, and he argues that capitalism, while not perfect,
Right.
has generated immense wealth, has lifted people out of poverty.
Yeah.
And it's fostered these institutions like democracy,
Yeah.
individual liberties
Okay.
that revolutionaries are trying to destroy.
Wow. So he's really making a bold claim here
Yeah.
that capitalism is actually a foundation for a just and free society.
Exactly. That's his main point.
And that socialism leads to tyranny.
Tyranny and oppression.
And he uses historical examples to back that up.
Exactly.
Wow. So this revolutionary mindset,
Yeah.
it's not just about economics then, is it?
No.
It's about it's like a clash of values.
Yeah.
It's about the structure of society.
It's about a fundamental
Yeah.
vision of the future.
Gotcha. That makes sense. So how do these revolutionary movements actually gain power?
Well, that's what's really interesting. Carvalho argues that one of the main strategies is through manipulation
Okay.
and what he calls hegemony.
Okay. So can you break down what he means by that? Especially this hegemony?
So hegemony is about establishing dominance,
Okay.
but not through force,
Yes.
but through more subtle forms of control.
Okay.
It's about shaping the narrative, setting the terms of the debate,
Right.
and influencing how people think and behave
Okay.
without them even realizing they're being influenced.
So it's like an invisible power structure.
Exactly.
Interesting. So,
How do they do this?
well, he says that revolutionaries are masters
Okay.
of manipulating language and culture
Okay.
to achieve this hegemony.
Gotcha.
They're experts at what we might call cultural warfare.
Cultural warfare, what does that look like in practice?
Well, he talks about how they'll exploit social divisions,
Yep.
turn people against each other based on race or gender or
Right.
whatever.
So they can use.
Yeah, they'll redefine words.
They'll create new taboos.
Right.
And they'll use accusations of bigotry
Okay.
to silence anyone who disagrees with them.
So it's like political correctness.
That's one way to describe it, yeah.
Okay.
He sees it as a way to control the narrative
Okay.
and make certain ideas unthinkable or even unspeakable.
Gotcha.
It creates this climate of fear where people are afraid to express their true opinions.
Right. So instead of having an open debate,
Yeah.
and a free exchange of ideas,
Right.
everybody is walking on eggshells.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so that's how this revolutionary agenda is able to advance.
Exactly.
By silencing opposition.
By silencing opposition.
Interesting.
And creating this illusion of consensus.
Gotcha. And he doesn't really hold back when it comes to
No.
criticizing the intellectuals and the journalists
Yeah.
that he believes are furthering this agenda.
Yeah, he uses that term useful idiots.
Right.
And he really believes that a lot of these intellectuals and journalists,
Yeah.
while maybe well-intentioned, are serving the revolutionary agenda
Right.
without realizing.
Without even realizing it.
Yeah.
So they're being seduced by the rhetoric
Yeah, exactly.
and promoting these ideas.
And they're blinded by their idealism.
And they're blinded by their...
Yeah, this need to be on the right side of history,
Right,
that
yeah.
they don't see the long-term consequences.
Right. And the education system. He really doesn't like the education system.
No, he doesn't.
And the media.
No, he sees them as being heavily infiltrated by this revolutionary mindset.
Wow. Interesting.
He's particularly critical of this thing called socio-constructivism.
Okay.
It's this approach to education
Okay.
that he thinks has dumbed down the curriculum
Yeah.
and undermined critical thinking skills.
I've heard him talk about this.
Yeah,
He thinks it's more about indoctrination than education.
exactly. Yeah.
Interesting.
He thinks it's about molding young minds
Right.
into accepting a particular worldview
Rather
than equipping them with the tools.
to think for themselves.
Yeah.
And the media, he's not a fan.
Not a fan. No.
He thinks that they're just furthering this agenda.
Yeah. Silencing conservative voices,
Yeah.
amplifying leftist narratives.
So it's interesting
Yeah.
because what he's saying about Brazil
Yeah,
could be applied to a lot of countries.
I think so too.
A lot of places have these same problems
Yeah, absolutely.
with media bias.
Yeah.
So he's really making us think
Yeah.
about the forces that are shaping the world.
He is.
He's making us question.
Question the narratives.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And that's a valuable thing.
It is.
Regardless of what your political leanings are.
It is.
So we've defined the revolutionary mindset.
We have.
We've seen
Mhm.
how these movements gain power through manipulation.
Yeah.
What are the ultimate consequences of all this?
Well, that's really the scary part.
Yeah.
What happens when this mindset actually takes hold of a society?
Of a society.
And Carvalho doesn't really sugarcoat it. He paints a pretty bleak picture
Okay.
of what he sees happening in Brazil
Okay.
and what could potentially happen on a global scale
Okay.
as a result of this revolutionary mindset,
Okay.
gaining influence.
Okay.
And he's particularly concerned about what he does the moral decay of society,
Yeah. That's a big one.
He attributes rising crime rates,
Yeah.
the erosion of individual liberties,
Okay.
and a general decline in social values to the influence of this mindset.
So he's saying that this erosion of traditional morality is leading to policies and ideologies that are harmful.
Exactly. Yeah.
And he uses specific examples from Brazil,
He does.
like the Bolsa Familia program.
Yeah.
This is a program that gives financial aid to low-income families.
Yeah.
But he argues that it actually creates a culture of dependency.
Yeah. He says that while the intentions may be noble,
Okay.
the unintended consequences
Yeah.
are actually really harmful.
So these well-intentioned programs,
Social programs
social programs,
can actually backfire.
and backfire.
Yeah.
Okay.
He says they create perverse incentives.
Okay.
They reward bad behavior
Gotcha.
and ultimately weaken the fabric of society.
So he also sees a connection
Yeah.
between the revolutionary mindset
Yeah.
and globalism.
And globalism.
So he really sees globalism as a force that's eroding national sovereignty.
Yeah, weakening traditional institutions.
Right.
And promoting a sort of homogenous secular worldview.
That he believes is destructive.
Yeah.
That's a pretty strong stance.
It is.
Against globalization.
Yeah.
He really sees it as undermining.
Like the foundations of society,
Yeah.
you know?
Wow.
He believes that this revolutionary mindset is at the heart of the globalist movement, and that they're trying to push the world towards this sort of centralized bureaucratic control that will stifle freedom and creativity.
So he's not very optimistic.
He's not an optimist, no.
About the future.
But, you know, whether you agree with him or not,
Right.
I think his work raises some really important questions.
It does.
That we have to consider.
You know, and he's making us think about the direction society is headed in.
Yeah.
And the forces that are shaping our world.
Absolutely.
And that's a valuable exercise.
It is.
Regardless of where you stand politically.
It is.
So I think the key takeaway here is that he's challenging us
to be more aware.
To be more aware of how language, culture, ideology are being used to shape our perceptions of the world.
Absolutely.
He's urging us to be critical thinkers.
Yes.
To question the narratives that we're being told.
To look beyond the surface.
Yeah, we can't just passively accept information.
No.
Especially today.
Especially today.
When we're constantly
bombarded with information.
Yeah, so we need to be active participants.
Absolutely.
In shaping the world. We have to engage critically with these ideas. And form our own
informed opinion.
Informed opinions.
Yes.
Well said.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on this exploration.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Of Olavo de Carvalho's thought-provoking ideas.
Yeah.
And until next time.
Yes.
Keep those minds sharp.
Absolutely. And that brings us to another crucial aspect of his thinking. You know, how do these revolutionary movements actually gain power and influence? How do they get people to buy into this worldview?
Right, because it's one thing to have an ideology.
Yeah.
But it's another thing to actually spread it and get people to follow you.
Exactly. So how do they do that?
So Carvalho, he argues that a key part of their strategy is what he calls hegemony.
Hegemony.
Yeah, and it's all about establishing dominance.
Okay.
But not through force.
Got to.
But through these more subtle forms of control.
Okay.
It's about, shaping the narrative.
Right. Setting the terms of debate and ultimately influencing how people think and behave without them even realizing it.
So it's kind of like an invisible power structure.
Exactly.
That's shaping our perceptions of the world.
Exactly.
Ow.
And Carvalho argues that revolutionaries are masters of this.
Okay.
They're masters of manipulating language and culture to achieve this hegemony. And, they're experts at what we might call cultural warfare.
Cultural warfare. So what does that look like? Like, what are some examples of that?
Well, he talks about how they'll exploit social divisions. Okay. Right? They turn people against each other based on race, gender, any category they can use.
Okay.
They'll redefine words. Create these new taboos. And they'll use accusations of bigotry or insensitivity to silence anyone who disagrees with them.
Right. It sounds a lot like what we call political correctness today.
Yeah, that's one way to put it. And Carvalho, he sees this as a way to control the narrative and make certain ideas unthinkable or even unspeakable.
So you can't even talk about certain things.
Exactly. Can't even bring them up.
Right.
It creates this climate of fear where people are afraid to express their true opinions.
Because they're afraid of being canceled?
Exactly.
Or labeled as some kind of bigot or something?
Exactly, yeah.
So instead of having this open debate and this free exchange of ideas, everybody's just kind of walking on eggshells.
Exactly.
And that's how this revolutionary agenda is able to advance.
Exactly.
Because they've silenced the opposition.
They've silenced the opposition, and they've created this illusion of consensus.
Like everybody agrees.
Right.
When in reality,
maybe they don't.
Right.
But they're just too afraid to speak up.
Gotcha. And he also has some pretty harsh things to say about the role of intellectuals and journalists.
He does.
In this process.
Yeah, he's not shy about criticizing them.
I've heard him use the term useful idiots to describe them.
He does.
What does he mean by that?
So it is a harsh term.
Right.
But it reflects his belief that many intellectuals and journalists,
okay,
while they may be well-intentioned,
okay,
they end up serving the revolutionary agenda.
Right.
Without fully understanding the implications.
So they're being used.
They're being used as pawns.
As pawns, yeah.
In this larger game.
In this larger game.
That they don't even fully comprehend.
Gotcha.
They become unwitting mouthpieces for these ideas.
Right.
That are ultimately undermining the very values they claim to uphold.
So they think they're doing good.
They think they're doing good.
But in reality, they're actually harming.
They're actually harming society, according to Carvalho.
Right, according to Carvalho.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And he thinks it's because they're blinded by their own idealism, this need to be on the right side of history, that they don't see the long-term consequences of the ideas that they're promoting.
So they're not thinking critically.
They're not thinking critically enough.
About the implications of what they're doing.
Exactly.
And he doesn't hold back in his critique of specific institutions either.
No, he doesn't.
Particularly the education system and the media.
Yeah, he sees those as key players in shaping public opinion.
Okay.
And he believes that they've been heavily infiltrated by this revolutionary mindset.
Wow, so they're no longer serving their intended purpose?
In his view, no.
Okay.
He's particularly critical of what he calls the socio-constructivist approach to education.
Okay.
Which he thinks has dumbed down the curriculum and undermined critical thinking skills.
Yeah, he's talked about that before.
Yeah.
He thinks it's more about indoctrination than education.
Exactly.
It's about, molding young minds.
Molding young minds.
To accept a particular worldview.
Exactly.
Rather than equipping them with the tools to think for themselves.
Exactly.
And his take on the media is not much kinder.
No, not at all.
He sees them as being complicit.
Complicit in promoting this revolutionary agenda.
Wow.
Silencing conservative voices.
Right.
Amplifying leftist narratives.
And creating this echo chamber.
Creating an echo chamber where dissenting views are rarely heard.
Right.
And anyone who challenges the dominant narrative is just quickly marginalized or attacked.
And it's interesting because while he's talking specifically about Brazil, these issues of media bias and the control of information, these are relevant all over the world.
All over the world, yeah.
So it's not just a Brazilian problem.
No, not at all.
This is something that we're seeing.
This is a global phenomenon.
Yeah, globally.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that makes his work so thought-provoking.
I think so, too.
Even if you don't agree with everything he says.
Yeah.
He's forcing us to think critically about the forces that are shaping our perceptions of the world.
And the narratives that we're being presented with, absolutely.
And that's valuable.
It is.
Regardless of where you stand politically.
It is.
So we've defined how Carvalho defines this revolutionary mindset.
Right.
We've explored how he believes these revolutionary movements use manipulation and cultural warfare to gain power. Mm-hmm. But what does he see as the ultimate consequences of all of this?
Right. What happens when this mindset takes hold?
Yeah.
What does that look like in practice?
What does the world look like then?
Yeah, well, Carvalho doesn't really sugarcoat it. He paints a pretty bleak picture of what he sees happening in Brazil and what could potentially happen on a global scale, as this revolutionary mindset gains more and more influence.
Gotcha.
And one of the things he's particularly concerned about is what he calls the moral decay of society.
Right, the erosion of traditional values.
Exactly. Yeah, he attributes rising crime rates, the erosion of individual liberties, and a general decline in social values to this mindset.
So he's saying that as these traditional values erode, it leads to these policies and ideologies that are harmful.
Exactly.
Interesting. And he uses specific examples from Brazil.
He does.
Like the Bolsa Familia program.
Yeah.
Which gives financial aid to low-income families.
Right.
But he argues that it creates a culture of dependency.
Yeah, he says that while the program's intentions may be noble, the unintended consequences can actually be really harmful.
So these well-intentioned social programs can actually backfire.
They can backfire,
and create more problems than they solve.
Exactly.
He says they create perverse incentives.
Yeah, they reward bad behavior.
Right.
And they ultimately weaken the fabric of society.
By making people dependent on the government.
Exactly.
Gotcha. And he also sees a connection between this revolutionary mindset and globalism.
It's not globalism. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So what's the problem with globalism, according to Carvalho?
Well, he sees it as a force that's eroding national sovereignty, weakening traditional institutions, and promoting this kind of homogenous, secular worldview that he believes is ultimately destructive.
So he's not a fan of globalization?
Not really, no.
He thinks it's undermining the very foundation of society.
Yeah, he sees it as this sort of top-down control that's being imposed on people. And he believes that this revolutionary mindset is at the heart of that movement.
So it's not just about economics.
No.
It's about culture. It's about values.
It's about power.
It's about power.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a pretty bleak outlook on the future.
It's a pretty pessimistic view.
Yeah, well, whether you agree with him or not.
Yeah.
I think his work raises some really important questions.
I think so, too.
You know, it makes us think about the direction that society is heading in.
Yeah.
And the forces that are shaping our world.
Absolutely.
So it's a valuable exercise, regardless of where you stand politically.
I think it is, yeah.
So to wrap up this deep dive into Olavo de Carvalho's ideas, what are some key takeaways for our listeners?
Well, I think one of the most important things is that he's really challenging us to be more aware of how language, culture, and ideology are being used to shape our perceptions of the world.
So we need to be more discerning.
Yeah, we need to be more critical
about the information that we're consuming.
Absolutely.
And that's more important than ever.
Especially today.
Yeah, in this day and age.
With the internet and social media.
It's easy to get swept up.
In all the noise.
In the noise.
Yeah.
And just accept whatever we're being told.
Right.
So Carvalho's work reminds us
to be active participants.
And
shaping our world.
Yeah, we need to engage critically with these ideas.
Absolutely.
And form our own informed opinions.
Exactly.
Well said. And that's what we encourage here on The Deep Dive. So thanks for joining us on this exploration of Olavo de Carvalho's thought-provoking and often controversial ideas.
Your pleasure.
And until next time, keep those minds sharp